According to Urban Dictionary, a baby girl is a girl who is always there for you when nobody else is. A baby girl is a girl who will stay on the phone with you for countless hours until you fall asleep. As your relationship progresses, you will notice just how cute her giggle and smile really are. There are many qualities that can be associated with a baby girl, such as funny, sweet, cute, outgoing, sincere, giggly, baby mama type, cheesy, dumb, soulmate, just to name a few. In other words, a baby girl is a woman who is very well versed in the needs of men. Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are discussing the film Babygirl. Briefly, Babygirl follows a high-powered CEO who puts her career and family on the line when she begins an affair with a much younger intern. Movie stars Nicole Kidman as Rami Mathis in a powerhouse performance as this repressed woman trying to maintain her work-life balance. It also stars Harry Dickinson as Samuel, who gives a very solid performance himself. Most of the film focuses on the affair. We don't really get much insight into either Rami or Samuel's lives, but we get enough to explain the attraction. The limited background information that we have, especially about Rami, makes it very difficult for us to pigeonhole her. Is her relationship with Samuel as a result of trauma? Is it a need for power and control? Or is she genuinely looking to broaden her horizons? Rami and Samuel meet during an internship at her company. The relationship between Rami and Samuel is portrayed as one of a mentor and a mentee, and these lines get blurred as the film goes on. They swap roles so often and even forget who's in charge, constantly renegotiating the terms of their agreement. Rami is a boss in what seems like a very highly competitive environment. She invented a system that allows people to save time on menial tasks, and the film constantly makes the correlation between female sexuality and leadership. One of the questions this film asks is, who are we as women? In a speech by her protege Esme, she notes how a great leader embraces changes and takes chances by exploring the unknown. Through sincerity, vulnerability, and radical self-honesty, a great leader can create an environment that facilitates shared learning, compassion, and true human connection. For women to thrive, it's important to celebrate genuine authenticity and create a space where they are able to show off who they are, regardless of assumptions and fear. Rami has spent her whole life believing that she has exceeded expectations, when in reality she's only ever just met them. She has learned to adapt in a largely male environment that rewards greed and cruelty. Every morning she wakes up, puts on a pencil skirt, makes breakfast for her family, and at night makes obligatory love to her husband. And it's not until this affair that Rami's personal and professional life become blurred. The more time she spends with Samuel, the harder it is for her to hide her dissatisfaction at home. Her husband, played by Antonio Banderas, and on a side note, they really tried to convince us that this man was bad in bed, but there's a whole other conversation to be had there. But her husband is a playwright, he's a creative, and he's a surprisingly conservative one. We don't get much insight into his character. However, from what we see, he is working on a play about a woman in a dead-end marriage. However, unlike Rami, the main character in his play actually ends up committing suicide because of it. Her husband's interpretation of the play feels very old and outdated. The one time we do see him working, he's complaining that his lead actress just doesn't get it. For him, the play is about suicide. It's not about desire. And her husband does not seem open to any other interpretations besides his own. So much of the literature regarding women is tragic. Suicide is unfortunately a common trope that is used to really showcase the pain that women had to endure. If the play is about suicide, then there's no hope. And he even says her life ends before it even begins, and that's what their marriage feels like. Whenever Rami hints at trying something new, he laughs it off until they go back to the way things were. At work, Rami is very confident. She's able to communicate her needs and her demands. Like, she's very clear about who she is and what she wants. However, with her husband, this is not the case. She literally has to hide or whisper what she wants because she feels ashamed. When she is able to create an opportunity to have a genuine discussion with him, she retreats and tries to restore their relationship back to its default settings. Her ability to communicate her wants and needs with her family and friends feels very juvenile and childish, especially when you compare how she is at work. And I think a lot of women are conditioned to wait At work, she's a go-getter. However, at home, she's a complete doormat. And if you notice, it's always her husband that initiates sex, and she just ends up going along with whatever it is he wants. And when she starts this affair with Samuel, she literally doesn't know what to do with herself. And I think women are very good at waiting, but they're not very good at initiating, especially in the bedroom. And the bedroom is such a weird space because you have all these thoughts about what you want to do to this person, and then when you get there, you're just like too shy to ask, even though you're naked. The affair forces Rami to stop compartmentalizing, and she finally gets the chance to ask for what she wants. However, she just doesn't actually know what she wants. On one hand, she wants to give in to his demands, but she's his boss, and she can't really turn off boss mode, and she can't exactly go into servitude like she does at home with her husband. And so she has to try and figure out a way for these two personalities to coexist in the same space. Throughout the film, we are told that Rami grew up in a cult. We get these flashbacks of her around children, and I can imagine that growing up in that environment is very traumatic. And we do get hints of it, but we're never given the full story. And so she really seems like an individual that's had to take care of herself her whole life. And from what little we know, she has undergone extensive therapy regarding her childhood, and it seems like whatever is fueling her impulses have nothing to do with her childhood. And I think when it comes to female sexuality, women are often deemed sick or mad if they express any desires outside of having children. When she half confesses the affair to her husband, she mentions how she's had these fantasies in her head her whole life. And she describes these fantasies as these very specific thoughts that have polluted her brain. And she goes on to describe the discrepancy between how she sees herself and who she is at her core. She sees herself as a very smart, capable woman who's very caring and responsible, that has this dark side she's unable to control or bring to light. And I think most people believe themselves to be better than they actually are. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person, but I think sometimes we create very unrealistic expectations regarding what we should do and how we should be. And when we're unable to meet these expectations or even adjust to them when we get there, this can trigger a lot of self-destructive behavior. Rami has tried therapy, and instead of trying to figure out where these impulses are coming from and integrating them into her life, all it's enabled her to do is reject and repress this part of herself she finds undesirable and very scary. And as a result, she's been living in this tolerable state of unhappiness. And I think her inability to properly deal with these fantasies explains her phone and porn addiction. She's always looking for stimulation or some type of distraction. And I think denying these fantasies for so long or pushing them down has not just been ineffective, but incredibly destructive. When you pretend like something doesn't exist, you give it time to strengthen and grow. The affair doesn't actually end these fantasies in her head. They actually make them worse, and because she's never actually dealt with them, she doesn't know how to control them or what to do with them. And her behavior is confusing even to her, because almost without knowing it, she has created this mold of herself that up until this point, she felt could withstand even her darkest demons. Rami's unhappiness really has nothing to do with anyone else. She just doesn't know herself as well as she thinks she does. And she tries desperately to explain to her husband, Jacob, that this is just how she was born. Like, these are her default settings. And she tries to also explain to him that she's done her best to be normal. And I love how she describes normal as being what he wants. However, what he wants is doing nothing for her. And by telling him about the affair, she's hoping she hasn't destroyed her life completely. Like, this was the best way she could intervene. To be clear, having an affair with a younger man you work with, and especially supervise, is obscene and totally wrong. And she does recognize how this affair has turned her into a monster, and how it's basically leading her to a point where she's almost willing to just destroy everything. She's at the brink of letting this monster take over. I think if you want to understand yourself, you have to figure out what's driving certain behaviors, what exactly is triggering these impulses. And until you shine a light into these dark spaces and literally look them in the eye and ask, like, what is that? You'll never really get to the bottom of anything. And by confessing, Rami starts the process of not just confronting this monster inside of her, but trying to find a way to control it, and hopefully starting the process of living. Up until this point, she's done a great job of existing just going through the motions, and her life has become so intolerable that destroying it seemed like a better option than to continue to live this meaningless, soulless existence. And I think initially when she started the affair with Samuel, she thought she was confronting this monster inside of her, these fantasies inside of her, whatever is triggering this. But actually she was feeding it and making it worse. With Samuel, she's able to be vulnerable for the first time, and as a result, she puts herself at great risk, something she's conditioned herself to avoid doing. And through him, she kind of realizes she's never lived a day in her life. Like, this is the most stimulation. Like, this is the most alive she's felt in a long time. I really like how unsexy this movie is. Their interactions are awkward, they're weird. What sounds really good in your mind is just very strange when you try to play it out with someone. And because the boundary between them is not that firm, they don't really know how to act around one another. Throughout their interactions, Rami constantly tells Samuel how she wants to protect him and how she doesn't really want to hurt him. The age gap, as well as the power discrepancy between the two, definitely puts Samuel in a vulnerable position. And what attracted her to him in the first place was his ability to tame what seemed like a wild dog. Finding a partner that is willing to role play is one thing, but then finding an individual that is able to exhibit the right balance between control and love is incredibly difficult. And as their relationship progresses, it's clear that Rami is the one who needs protection from herself. She wants to explore, but she also doesn't want to be exposed. And because they're not really in love, it would be very easy for them to just stab each other in the back. And together, they kind of create this judgment-free zone where they're able to explore and talk about these desires openly. Neither character feels the need to maintain any kind of facade around each other. Like, they try to role play, but it's really awkward, and they completely fall out of character constantly. Their affair is a roller coaster of emotions. Sometimes Samuel is scared and he wants to end the affair, and sometimes Rami is scared and she just wants this boy to go away. And because they're constantly voicing their fears to one another, you don't really know how this is going to end. Rami, her husband Jacob, and Samuel are very high-functioning people, and this level of self-control can make them successful or completely destroy them if they loosen up a bit too much. And when the affair is finally exposed, I think they all just kind of realized, okay, this ain't worth it, and we need to figure out a way through this. And the ending made me feel very hopeful because it begins with Rami fake coming, and then it ends with her really coming. And for years and years, she's been lying to her husband about how satisfied she is in this marriage, and for the first time, he's able to actually recognize it and acknowledge it, and actually consider a point of view different from his own. Now, the ending of this film is not nearly as hot as its opening, but it's a lot more satisfying. There have been studies done where people are shown pictures and asked, does this turn you on? And they'll say no, but their body will say yes. And I think so many women are afraid to voice their dissatisfaction to their partner because they don't want to be seen in a bad light. And so they just kind of go through the motion. Okay. And I think because so many of us have a very specific idea of who we should be, we end up living very inauthentic and empty lives. And like Rami, you can end up creating a life and a version of yourself that's totally in contradiction to your essence as a human being. And the best way I can describe this is by borrowing a post from sexologist Juliet Allen. And Juliet describes essence as something we are born with. It is the untrampled potential of a human being's unique individuality. It is fully present in a baby and contains the blueprint for the true personality. Essence carries the code of what the individual could be at the highest level of his or her personal expression if he or she were not too badly interfered with by life and the insanity of society encountered on the road to maturity. By the time most of us reach an age of responsibility, we have shape-shifted away from essence and the pure potential of what our true personality could be into a false personality. This is a social identity that we have created to help us deal with the obtuseness of other people and vagaries of existence. Trying to respond to their demands on us, as well as dealing with their lack of perception as to who and what we truly are, we end up living out a lukewarm impersonation of our true selves. In the same manner, through engagement with inauthentic sexuality, we betray our sexual essence. Authentic sexual experience helps us recover it. So that's how the film bookends. It begins with her living this inauthentic life, and you can see it in her sex life and her interactions with her husband. And at the end, she's able to reconfigure her life to live more honestly. And the movie literally starts by asking, what kind of sex do you like? And I think what it's really asking is, do you even know what you like? Rather than end in suicide or murder, the film allows Rami, Samuel, and Jacob to start fresh. It gives them a blank slate. The affair totally destroys them and forces them to rebuild their lives and their personalities, and hopefully one that feels a lot better than who they were pretending to be before. Overall, I highly recommend this movie. I think Nicole Kidman gives a phenomenal performance, and she's able to bring out a lot of nuance in the script that might not be clear with a lesser actress. Like, she really is able to flesh out everything. I think movies like this are very cathartic, and if you're watching this film and you relate to Rami a little bit too much, then this is your sign to start figuring out why. And when it comes to authenticity, I mean, true authenticity, you're not able to pretend to be something you're not. You completely refuse. And I think ultimately no one can tell you what you like. You have to figure it out. Like, no one can kind of unlock that for you. And once you are able to grasp this, then you can start that journey. And so this is a phenomenal film. I think the acting helped. Again, they're able to bring out a lot of nuance from their performances. And you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.